Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. Now I know we are in the full Christmas and July spirit in the background here, but we're jumping into a new release that I'm doing with Spellbinders full of amazing birthday supplies for card making. I feel like I say every collection is my favorite because we're sort of gradually getting better and better as we create these releases, but this one is by far one of my favorites we've ever created. There are some amazing birthday icons like the Myar balloons, which look super realistic, and some incredible textures that are going to blow you out of the water for both birthdays, but also everyday card making. This whole collection and everything I use in today's video will be listed and linked down below so you can check it out, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Now without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, for the sentiments, let's talk about this Glimmer hot foil plate set called Birthday Sentiments. I love all of the sentiments that we included inside of here. There are so many different options. You have let's party, make a wish, happy birthday, cheers, wish big, congratulations, hooray, celebrate, may all your wishes come true, and you're invited. And the best part about this is that all of the words are on one plate. So it is one pass to go through and foil it, and there's a die that's included that cuts it all out at one time too. This means you only need to have 2 passes through machines, and you get all of these sentiments hot foiled and cut out ready to go for your cards. I love this format so much because it's a huge time saver when you're crafting, and I like to make lots of sentiments at once and save them for my projects. That way when I'm crafting, I can have an easy sentiment ready to go. We've also done several other sets with the same font and format in these hot foil and die sets. So if you end up falling in love with this concept for crafting, we have a couple other ones like this Christmas set with tons of different Christmas sentiments, as well as more of an everyday set with some really great basic sentiments that will last you through all different types of cards. These have kind of been a staple in my collection just because of how easy it is to foil them and die cut them all out. I get a lot of questions about this, so let's just run through some of the basics of hot foiling while we foil out these sentiments. So first off, let's talk about the foil. You want to get hot foil for this, which is totally different from toner foil or a laminator foil, so make sure to not use that for projects like this. It's not going to give you the same results. There are 2 different types of heat activated foil. I like to just recommend the Spellbinders Glimmer hot foil because I know that it's going to work really well with these machines, but there are several other brands that sell hot foil in the market as well. You can usually get them in a 1-pack like this or a variety pack like this. I'm going to start off by doing some gold hot foiling. I think gold is a great basic color for most projects, so let's start off with the gold hot foil. I've unrolled it a little bit onto my cutting mat here, and we're going to trim the foil down. Now to do this, I like to use this OLFA little rotary trimmer. I like it because it really cuts the foil super easily, whereas a scissors sometimes has a hard time with cutting the foil. This is just one pass and it really cuts so nicely. And you want to go pretty close around the hot foil plate, not leaving too much excess foil, because sometimes the excess foil will hot foil on your card where you don't want it to. So that's why I like to cut really close, and this rotary trimmer comes in handy, and then you can just put the guard back up and you won't cut yourself when it goes into storage. And then we have a piece of foil that is perfectly the size of our hot foil plate. I'm gonna do the same thing with the silver hot foil, and then we'll place the hot foil plate right down on top of that foil, and then we can go in and trim off the excess and make sure that our piece is perfectly sized for our hot foil plate. Okay, now I like to do my foiling using my Simon Hurley Stark White cardstock, so that's what I'm going to use today. Then I'm going to place my hot foil down onto my project with the pretty side facing up towards me. Then I'm going to take my hot foil plate and place it down with the pretty side facing towards the pretty side of the foil. So pretty side of the foil plate, face down towards the pretty side of the hot foil. Then I'm going to go in with a heat safe tape, or here I'm just using mint tape, and I'm just going to tape this down on my project to hold it in place when it runs through our hot foil machine. This will make sure we get a nice crisp foiled image without anything moving or shifting as it goes through. I like to light on the tape, but you totally don't have to if you don't want to. Then we'll bring in our Glimmer hot foil machine. You'll want to turn this on, and when it's ready to go, you'll have this green light, which means it's hot enough and ready to take the foiling. Then we can take our project that's all ready to go, and I'm going to place this with the foil plate facing down towards this heat plate so that it'll heat it all up really nicely. Then we'll press this button, which starts the timer, and once that goes nice and solid, it's ready to go for hot foiling. All right, that's solid, which means it's ready to go, and then I'm going to place down the thin shim and the spacer pad on top, and we'll pull this right out of the hot foiling machine. Then we'll bring in our Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and we're going to run this right through the die cutting machine. Do it nice and slow, that way you make sure there's no skipping in your foiling. And we'll do a little bit of awkward hot foiling as we start each other as it runs through our die cutting machine. Alright, then you'll want to lift off the foil plate, and I'm just going to set it off to the side on a heat safe surface. And once that's done, we can peel this off and check out that amazing foiled result that we get, and nothing moved or shifted because we had it taped down. but it looks absolutely beautiful. And every sentiment foils at once, which I really like. All right, next we'll do the same thing with our stark white cardstock. We'll lay down the golden foil, and then we'll take our hot foil plate and lay it with the pretty side facing the pretty side of the foil. Tape it down to hold it in place, and then we'll place it face down on our Glimmer hot foil machine and press the timer until it's ready. All right, once that goes solid, you know that we're ready. We're going to place down both of our plates right on top and pull this out of the Glimmer machine and run this right through nice and slowly to make sure that everything evenly foils. And we can peel off the foil and check out how that did. That beautiful golden shine on there. It's nice and solid. And again, all the sentiments are together, which is a huge win in my book. And then to cut these all out, it's super easy to take the die that cuts everything out and just line it up with a nice even white border all the way around the sentiments. And once it's all lined up, we'll go in with a little bit of mint tape to hold it down while we run it through our die cutting machine. And check this out, all of the sentiments easily pop out of the die, all cut out at once, so it saved so much time. And here's what they all look like once they're die cut out. So many great sentiments for all different birthday cards, and even just different celebration cards like hooray, celebrate, congratulations, cheers. A lot of these can be used for just regular parties as well, which I think makes it very versatile. Now I like to just take all these sentiments that are already foiled for me, and I'm going to place them into a little container like this one from scrapbook.com. Then I'll set this off to the side on my work surface, and that way when I'm creating birthday cards, all I need to do once I'm done is look in here for one of the sentiments. I can easily add this down to a card and it's ready to go. That way you don't need to do the foiling every single time you want a sentiment from this set. And we'll do the same thing with this gold set of sentiments too. All right, then again, we'll just pop these out into my little container. And that gives us so many options when we're creating our birthday or celebration cards. Next, let's talk about this Betterpress plate called Birthday Bash. I love this really great kind of fine line design that fills out a card really beautifully. It's really nice and graphic, so you can go in there and do the Betterpress design and color it in if you want to. Or you can use this for foiling, which is really awesome. And I'll show you an example of doing that in a little bit. The great part about this plate is that it also has a sentiment included too, right on the inside here. So you can of course use this in the design, or you can remove it if you want to put a different sentiment right in the center, but it was really great that we were able to include one in the set. If you haven't used the Betterpress machine before, let me show you a quick tutorial on how to use it. So this is the Spellbinders Betterpress. You want to start off by lifting off this top acrylic plate, and it has the markings for an A2 size and an A7 size card. I'm going to use one of the cotton card panels from Spellbinders. This is a little bit of a thicker cotton cardstock, and it works really well for Betterpress because it impresses the image really nicely into the cardstock. You can totally use another cardstock if you want to as well, but this is what gives it that really great kind of impression. Gonna line it up with those A2 size markings on the card, and I'm just gonna use a tiny little bit of tape on this to hold it down. I'm barely putting any tape on just to hold it into place. This is because the press plate that we're using is going to cover the whole card. So we're just gonna have to cut a little bit of the top and bottom off. You don't want to apply tape underneath this cardstock because then it might create a problem when you're doing your printing. You want the cardstock to be completely flat to this acrylic plate. Then I'm going to bring in the actual base of the system. Going to take my press plate and I'm just going to line it up on the A2 lines. Now there's a little bit of an overhang with this plate because we designed it to be slightly larger than an A2 size card, so you didn't have to be super precise with it every single time. So once it's lined up right in the center there, we can then ink up this design. Now Spellbinders actually has Betterpress inks in their collection, which work really well with these plates, but again, you can try any ink you have in your collection too. I just like these because they're waterproof, permanent, and also they have a great thicker, oily viscosity to them, so they tend to stick to the plate really nicely and give a great impression. I'm going to start off with a little bit of strawberry ink, and I'm just going to lightly ink up this Betterpress plate. Now when you're inking the Betterpress plates with these ink pads, I find the best way to get the ink out is by applying pressure and doing this sort of twisting motion on top of the Betterpress plate. I find that if you just tap, it doesn't give you the best result. You want to kind of go back and forth like this, and you'll get a really great inking with these pads. Now I want to create kind of a rainbow of colors, so by using red, yellow, and blue, these are going to blend in between to create kind of an orange color, and these are going to blend in between to create a nice green. So you sort of get like a whole rainbow array of colors with just these three ink pads, which is awesome. Then last, we'll go in with a little bit of hydrangea. We'll bring this up to overlap just a little bit with that yellow to create a nice green. And don't worry if you overlap a little bit, you can always take your ink pad and swipe it to the side until it goes back to the original color. You're not gonna ruin these ink pads, so don't worry about it. Now I also want this sentiment to be right in the center, so I'm just going to line up the happy birthday to you, and then I'll bring in the little Betterpress black ink pad, and we're just going to, again, ink this up by going kind of side to side, and giving it some good pressure. Then I'm going to take the acrylic top, flip it down onto these magnets to line it up, and then we'll run this slow and steady right through our die cutting machine. And then when we lift this off, check out that beautiful impression that you get from the Betterpress machine. That is so cool, and it's nice and impressed on the surface in real life and gives this really great sort of textured effect to the background. It's difficult to be able to show you the actual impression, but the lines you get are so crisp and detailed, and I absolutely love this beautiful birthday design. This would be a great design to sort of mass produce birthday cards with. I think it looks beautiful once it's done. Now, if you want to clean these Betterpress plates off, you can always go in and use the Archival Ink Cleaner. Because it has sort of an archival ink base, this is going to help clean it really well. It has a little dauber top, and you can just kind of daub it all over the metal stamps, and then go in and wipe them off to clean it. Now, it's going to most likely stain the plates, but that's about as clean as you're going to get it, and that color isn't going to transfer over to the next time you use it. All right, for the card base, I want to do a little pop of color, so I'm going in with this pool colored cardstock and fold it down into an A2 size top folding card. And then we'll just trim this down slightly so that it has a nice pool colored border all the way around. And then we'll adhere this right down onto our card base. And I love how this card looks with that Betterpress stamped background. It's super simple, but I think it is really impactful and would be really great and easy to mass produce for lots of cards like this. And I love that little pop of color in the background too, just using a colored card base. It really brings the card to life and finishes it off nicely. Now, the differentiating factor between Betterpress plates and hot foil plates is that these have a gray coating to them, whereas the hot foil plates have that kind of copper coating to them, so you know the difference really easily in your collection. Betterpress plates are able to be used for foiling, but the hot foil plates are not able to be used in the Betterpress machine because the hot foil plates are just slightly thicker, and I don't want you guys to break your Betterpress machines. All right, so I'm just going to place this down onto my hot foil here to make sure that I cut enough, and I'll cut it right at the edge. And then I'll also go in and just cut off any of this excess to make sure we don't get any overfoiling. And again, it cuts super easily with that rotary trimmer. I love how simple that makes it. With this, I'm gonna stack the foil a little bit differently. I'm gonna start off with the Betterpress plate facing upwards with that design side. And this time I'm going to lay down the foil with the pretty side facing towards the design side of the plate. You always want the pretty side of the foil facing the pretty side of the plate. Then we can take our stark white cardstock and lay it right on top. And the great part is the Betterpress plate is just slightly bigger than the cardstock, so you don't have to worry too much about it lining up perfectly because there will be a little bit of overhang anyways. All right, then we'll pull this right out. And I'll run this right through my Platinum 6 die cutting machine. Nice and slowly to make sure that everything foils. All right, then we can peel off this hot foil and check out that beautiful design. It really was able to capture all of those amazing details in the hot foil, and it looks gilded. It is really just stunning. All right, with this, I'm gonna go in with a rainbow blend of inks and my ink blending tools, and I'm just going to start bringing in ink from the edge and slowly and lightly blend it out into the center of the background. Next, I'll go in with a little bit of Prom Queen to bring in some pink. And with this, again, I'm starting out at the edge here, and then I'll lightly blend it into the center of the background, really lightening up my pressure as I get into the center, because I want to kind of fade it out much lighter there. Next, we're bringing in a little bit of Guppy, which is this nice orangish yellow color. We'll bring it in next to that pink, and they blend together super smoothly and beautifully there. And then again, just lighten up the pressure when you get towards the center. Moving into Shooting Star, which is this nice bright yellow color. Starting out at the edge and blending it lightly into the center. Next, we'll move into Psych, which is this kind of greenish yellow color. It'll be a good transition from the yellows to the greens. It's kind of a nice lime color. And from there, we'll bring in Later Gator, which is this nice mid-tone green color, and blend it right into Psych. Moving into a little bit of Tropical Tango, which is this gorgeous teal color, and I'll bring it in right next to the green. Moving into a light blue, we'll go into Clear Skies and blend it into Tropical Tango. Then into No Diving, which is this nice mid-tone bright blue color. And then we'll finish it off with Crown Me, which is this gorgeous kind of regal purple color. All right, and then with this background, if you want to add a little bit more texture, I'm going to go in and just gently spray a couple little drops of water all over the blended background. And my inks react really well with water, so they're going to kind of add a little bit of a texture or like bleaching effect wherever the water goes. Then I'll go in with a paper towel and just kind of lightly pick up some of those water spots. And then we can go in with a heat tool to intensify those areas and dry them. And here's what that looks like once it's completely dry. You can totally leave it completely smooth with that ink blending if you want to, but I love that little bit of detail and depth that it adds to add the water splotches all over the background. All right, now I'm trimming this down just to have a little slight border. And then we'll adhere this right down onto our A2 size card. And by trimming that slight little bit off, we get a really nice, super thin white border all the way around the background. I'm also gonna hot foil this sentiment too, so we'll just go in and trim out enough foil for it. And then for the sentiment, I'm going to place it right down onto my cardstock like this. And again, I'm going to use a little bit of mint tape to hold it in place just because I don't want the sentiment to shift at all. Then we'll throw it in our Glimmer machine and we'll run this right through our die cutting machine to easily foil it. Then when we lift this off, check out that really great foiling we got across the sentiment. And there's no die for this sentiment, but I can easily go in with my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors and just trim right around it. You could always just cut it out on a rectangle too, but I love the clean look and finished detail that it gives when you go right around the edges to do the fussy cutting around the sentiment. And to finish this off, I'll adhere the sentiment front and center onto our card on some foam tape. And here's a closer look at that finished card using the Birthday Bash Betterpress set. I really love how this turns out. It was super simple to use the Betterpress plates in our hot foil system, and you get that gorgeous gold foil all over that background. And like I said, I love that we were able to include the sentiment in that set where you can use it together or separately, because I think it works so well along with this press plate. All right, next we have this die set called Mylar Balloons. And this creates really great 3D looking, layering, realistic Mylar balloons. You get a star, a circle, and a heart, and 3 different strings with them kind of going in different directions, and also these little loop-de-loops at the end, which makes for really fun and playful balloons. I also love that each one of the balloons has kind of an outside layer and another layer on the inside with even more texture, and also these little highlight markings too, which makes them really come to life. Now when it comes to my die sets with Spellbinders, they actually come on this sort of vellum-like sheet. We did this because I hate when dies are adhered to cardstock like this because it tends to just kind of rip and be really hard to remove. So something about this vellum makes it really easy to remove the die pieces from the vellum sheet and the adhesive without anything ripping or being difficult to pull out. And I also want to mention that all of the dies come separated and detapped for you. So there's no going in there with your pliers and kind of snipping and having metal fly everywhere, which just actually is dangerous. So I really like that they do this for you, and you're saving tons of time where you can get to crafting rather than having to spend a bunch of time snipping your dies apart. And then once everything's out of the packaging, I like to stick my dies down to these Stampin' Storage 6x7 magnetic cards. I really love these because they're nice and sturdy. They've got like a cardboard or chipboard backing to them, which makes them really nice and sturdy, and I don't have to be worried about any of my dies falling off of here when I'm handling it and moving it around my craft room. But they're also super easy to pull off of here and put right back onto, so you don't have to worry about them being too stiff. I like this because when they're in storage facing upwards like this, I don't have to worry about putting them in sleeves or anything to make sure my dies don't fall off of them while I'm flipping through and finding the die set that I want to use. So I highly recommend these if you're in the market for new die storage. This I've had great luck with. I've tried using the magnetic vent covers, but they're a little bit too thin and flimsy for me sometimes, so these have been really helpful. All right, so with each balloon shape in this die set, you're going to have an outer frame, and you're also going to have an inside piece, which is the second detail layer. I like to cut out the inside layer with a lighter colored cardstock, and I like to cut out the outside layer with a slightly darker shade of cardstock in that color. Now you could also use your inks to change white cardstock to whatever color you want to if you don't have a ton of colors of cardstock. And then I'll go in and run this right through my die cutting machine. Do a little bit of awkward die cutting as we cut out this balloon. Alright, then you can see this outside frame cut out the whole shape as well as the little string at the bottom. And then this middle piece is going to cut out this layer that goes right on top, which adds lots of little texture around the outside to make it look more like a Mylar balloon, and also some little highlighted areas. I think it looks great. Then I'll repeat the same color process for all the different shapes of balloons that are in this set. So naturally I'm going to use pink for the heart balloon. So I'm going in with the lighter pink for the inside and the darker pink for that frame. And then lastly, I'm going to use light and dark orange for the circle balloon. And that's how the circle is going to look. Then all 3 strings and little ties are all attached, and I'm going to cut these out using some metallic silver cardstock. And that cuts out these little detailed strings really nicely, and these little squiggles as well. And then when it comes to die cutting, you guys know I like to add a little bit of depth and dimension using inks. So I'm gonna go in with a color that's just slightly darker than these balloons, and I'm just gonna go right around the edges and blend it in using this little Altenew detail blending brush. This is going to add a little bit of depth and shading around the edge, and it's going to make the object look like it's circular like this balloon and give it kind of a 3D domed effect. So like by adding shading to the star balloon and making that center lighter, it makes it look like the center is closer towards you and that the shaded areas are are a little bit further back, which gives it this really great 3D looking effect when you put it together. And then I'll just use a little bit of liquid adhesive to adhere it together. And I'll follow the same steps with the other two balloons using a color that's similar to their respective color. So here I'm going in with just a slightly darker orange color and going around the edge to blend it in. And here's how that orange balloon looks once you adhere it together. And then last but not least, I'll shade in this pink balloon using a little bit of Prom Queen ink. Just adding some depth and dimension around the edges and leaving that center nice and light. And here's what that heart balloon should look like once it's all adhered together. So here we have the Plaster 3D embossing folder, and this one looks like just such a piece of art every time you do it. I can barely believe it's made out of cardstock every time I run it through my die cutting machine. This was super inspired by all the kind of modern art you've been seeing lately, people taking plaster and sort of swiping it across canvases and getting those really great kind of graphic strokes of plaster on the canvas. I think it looks so cool, and I wanted to transfer this over to an embossing folder. So a huge shout out to the team at Spellbinders for making this one happen, because she actually created real plaster artwork and we sent that in for the example, and this is what came out of it. I can't wait to show you how this one embosses. All right, so the great thing about Spellbinders embossing folders is they're 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches, so you really have a lot of real estate to work with in here. When you're using an A2 size card, you can really choose where you want to place it in here and what section of the design you want to get, which I really love. It gives you so many more options than just having a tiny embossing folder where you only have one spot you can set it in. Now when it comes to 3D embossing, I like to take the cardstock and just lightly mist it on both sides. This is going to get the fibers of the cardstock softened and ready to mold to the design rather than cracking the cardstock when it runs through. All right, and for the sake of this video, I'm going to emboss the whole design so you can see how the entire thing looks. So I'll place it inside the folder, close it up, and then when using Spellbinders 3D embossing folders, you're going to take out all of your plate except for the platform base, which is the A plate. Then you're going to place in the embossing folder, and you'll use the D adapter plate, which is this gray plate, and place it right on top. This is the sandwich for embossing, and then we'll run it right through our die cutting machine. All right, and when I lift this up, check out that insane design. It amazes me every single time it comes out of the embossing folder. And the crazy part is just how much detail we were able to get in this embossing folder with all of the different 3D highs and lows that are going all throughout it. And you get all of the little texture from the actual plaster. So all of those little bubble marks are in there, which creates for such a cool looking, unique 3D background. And again, like I said, you're able to sort of chop this up into different sections for your A2 size card and really pick the area you want to use from the embossing folder on your design. We included this in the birthday collection because it looks like frosting, and I think it would be really cool with like a cake image in front of it and really goes along with that birthday theme. But I also am going to be using this all year long because the plaster design is really just a great texturized background that you could put florals in front of, or really any sort of design element. And this would be so cool inked up as well. All right, so I've trimmed this down now, and then I got 2 A2 size card backgrounds from that embossing folder, which is really great. To finish off this card, I'm going to adhere the plastered embossed design down to my card base using a little bit of liquid glue, and we'll just adhere it right down. And the liquid glue helps to make sure that this is going to stick really nicely because there's so many grooves and 3D points in this design. The liquid glue kind of squishes out all over the area and makes sure that it's going to stay down nicely. All right, and here's the sort of layout I want these balloons to have. And once we got this all figured out, we can go in and start adhering things. So I want this orange balloon adhered flat onto the card, so I'll adhere that down with liquid adhesive. And then I'm going to adhere the star on some foam tape to pop it up. And then we'll adhere down those little strings along underneath the balloons. And then I love these little strings that kind of dangle off the edge. I think that really adds to the design and makes it very playful, so I'll just add those on. And I'll trim anything that hangs over the edge. Then I chose a silver hot foiled sentiment that we had that just says happy birthday, and I'm going to place this right down in the center on top of those strings. And there's that finished card. I absolutely love those big Mylar balloons on the front of the card. They look so 3D and realistic. I think they're super cool for birthdays. And then using that plaster embossing folder in the background added so much texture, even though we just did it on white cardstock. Like I said, it's going to be great for birthdays, but even just any images in front of it really adds lots of texture and dimension to the background without taking away from the focal point image. Especially if you leave it nice and white like this, it just adds a bunch of texture. I love how this card turned out, and I can't wait to send it out for one of my friends' birthdays. All right, now for this one, I'm gonna go in and do some inking and just show you how amazing this folder is with picking up ink into those designs. So I'm going in with my blending tool. This is the blending foam, and I like the foam because it sort of hits those raised areas more and gives you more dimension on the raised areas, and then gets a little bit lighter when it goes down into the grooves of the design. And there is just so much detail and dimension in this design. It gives you a really great 3D look when you start blending ink on top of it. Then I'll throw in a little bit of no diving ink, which is this nice mid-tone blue color, and I'll just blend that in. And then last but not least, I'll mix in a little bit of Tropical Tango, which is this great teal color, and it blends beautifully with the rest of the blues. And I mean, check out how stunning that looks all inked up. You can see all of the amazing detail and texture that that has. Now to finish this off and add a little bit of shine, I'm gonna go in here with some slippery and wet lunar paste. Just going to dip my finger in very lightly, get a tiny little bit of that paste on my finger, and just rub it over the embossing folder in some areas really nice and lightly. This is going to catch only the raised areas of the surface and give me a little bit of golden shine in those areas. I'll add a little bit of gold down here. And it kind of looks like a crystal when you apply this great, beautiful shine down to it too. All right, and there's that colored background with that beautiful metallic look. And I love how that inked background looks with that little bit of gold going all the way through it. I think it looks absolutely stunning and catches the light beautifully. Next, let's move into the Party Balloons 3D embossing folder, and there's a coordinating stencil set called Layered Party Balloons that goes along with it. Now, I do want you to know that you can buy both of these products together to coordinate, or you can buy the 3D embossing folder individually, but you can't buy the stencil set individually. So if you think you're gonna want the stencils to coordinate, buy them both together at the same time at the beginning, because there's no way to get the stencils separate. It just makes it a little bit less confusing that way, so I hope you understand, but if you want them together, buy the bundle of both of them together. So this 3D embossing folder does those really great Mylar balloon designs across a whole card, and it does it really beautifully. And again, that 3D effect really adds tons of texture all over those balloons. And then of course you have the stencil set, which is going to lay over each one of the balloons to give them different colors and then give them highlights as well. I love this one, so let me dive in and show you how it works. So here is that Party Balloons embossing folder. Again, it's 5.5 inches by 8.5, so quite large. Again, I'm going to mist down my cardstock to make sure it's nice and ready for the embossing. And then I'll go in here with my stark white cardstock, place it right inside, and close it on the design. Then we'll go in and place that on our platform base and place in the D adapter plate and run it right through our die cutting machine. All right, and when we lift this out of here, check out that beautiful embossed design. It gives that really great 3D effect where all of these balloons are raised off the surface and tons of texture inside of them. All right, then I'm going to place this down on my large photopolymer sticky mat, and this is going to hold everything in place while we do our stenciling. And then we'll bring in our stencils. We'll start off with this heart layer, and to make sure everything's lined up, Spellbinders actually has these little markings down in the corner that are etched for you. So it'll just line up with all of the corners of your design, but you can also tell really easily by just lining it up with your embossed design too. And we'll stick the edges down into the sticky mat, and then we'll go in and blend in our design using the Simon Hurley Create Die Inks. So I'm starting off quite light with this blending brush here, just kind of giving a full coverage to all of the images. And then again, we'll go in with a smaller, more detailed blending brush, and we're just going to bring that color out around the edge a lot darker. And again, this is going to draw your eye into the center, making it look a lot more 3D, like these are circular domed balloons. And so just this little bit of shading is really going to bring the balloons to life. And I'll just follow that same step on every single one of them. And you can really see just how drastically the little bit of shading you can add really changes up the whole look of the balloon and makes it look a lot more realistic. All right, then we'll wipe off any of the extra ink while that stencil is still lined up. And then we can lift it right off of our surface and we have that first layer of balloons colored in. Next, we'll move into our next star balloons. Again, lining up the corners of the design should really easily line up your stencil. And then we'll just stick it down into our sticky mat here. For this one, I'll use bright yellow shooting star on my large blending brush. And again, just go in and add a light layer of color all over these balloons. For the darker layer on this one, I'm going to use a little bit of slippery and wet on a smaller blending brush. And again, just go around the edge and add a little bit of detail and shading. And once that's all shaded in, again, we can go in and wipe off our stencil with a dry cloth while it's still on there. and then lift it off the surface, and we now have our second layer perfectly colored and shaded in. I really love how easy this process is when it comes to layering stencils and coloring these images in on embossing folders. So again, just lining up the edges along with the image on our design here to make sure everything's lined up. And for this, we'll go in with a bit of Roar, which is our nice orange color, and just blend all over the surface of these balloons. So again, just starting off with kind of a light wash of color around all of them. And it's super easy to do with these really large brushes. You really are able to get into all these images very quickly. And then I'm actually going to use the same Roar color and just using a little mini blending brush, and I'm going to blend this in to concentrate the colors around the edges again. Now, you can always use the same color. So here I'm using the exact same color, and by adding a little bit more on top and adding it in a more concentrated amount, it's going to look like a much darker color. Because these are translucent dye-based inks, the more you layer them up, the more each layer is going to get darker and darker. So you don't need tons of inks to do this shading. You can actually do it with the same exact color, just using a little bit more of a heavy hand as you're layering it, and it looks completely different and really adds tons of dimension. I like that because you don't need a ton of inks in your collection to do this sort of layering technique and really add lots of great dimension to your images. And then once that's complete, again, we can wipe this off really easily while the stencil's still down and lift it right off of our surface, and everything is beautifully colored in. I love how that looks. Now there is a fourth layer which adds all of these great highlights to the balloons. So again, I'm just going to lay this right down. And for the highlights, I'm going to use the coordinating Solar Paste color because Solar Paste is white. So it'll give us that great kind of lighter highlight, but I wanted to shine the exact color that's underneath it. So each one of these has a little bit of a mica color shift into it. So we'll place the color that coordinates on top of the ink's color. So I'm just using my palette knife from my paste tool set, and I grab just a little bit of paste, starting off with a little bit of Cross My Heart, and we're going to put this right through that pink area. So where all of those pink balloons are, I'm just going to hold it in place right in that area to make sure the stencil doesn't lift up, and apply a little bit of our paste right through. Next, I'll go in with a little bit of orange overheated, and again, just take a little bit of that paste out and apply it right over all of the orange balloons, nice and smooth. And then last but not least, we have Golden Hour, which is going to go along with the yellow star balloons. So we'll just take it right out of the container here and smooth it over top of all of the star balloons. All right, then we can lift this right off the surface. And now all of those balloons have some really great highlights to them in Solar Paste, and it has the coordinating shifting color right on top. To clean off the stencil, I'm just gonna spray it down with water and go in with a little bit of paper towel to wipe it all out. And it cleans off really easily while it's still wet, which is great. All right, so here's what that looks like once the Solar Paste is all dry. It sort of seeps up a little bit of that color, so it doesn't say stark white, but it is a lighter version of that color, which is really fun. And when you tilt it in the light, it has a little bit of a shine or glow that matches the color that's underneath it, which is so much fun. All right, so I've cut this background down and adhered it down to a 5x7 card base, and I'm going to use the foiled sentiment in gold that says Let's Party, and I want to kind of center it up on this star. I think that's a fun place for the sentiment. It's a smaller sentiment, so it kind of grounds it in place, and I'll adhere that down on some foam tape to pop it up. All right, and here's a closer look at the finished card. I kept it super simple by just using the Party Balloons embossing folder and a layering stencil set to color it in. That in itself is a really great background that also acts as a focal point because these balloons stand out really nicely and create a great card background. And then finishing it off with that little hot foiled sentiment that says Let's Party is a great way to tie everything all together. I love how this one looks, and I don't make 5x7 cards often, but this one is a great background for a 5x7 card. And then here is this really great 3D embossing folder called Flourish. And this is kind of like a floral design. It almost is reminiscent of like frosting designs at the bottom of cakes where they do that piping, but we also made it pretty generic. So you can use this on many different cards all throughout the year, no matter what the season or theme. Again, I'm gonna go in and mist my cardstock with some water to get it ready for embossing. And then I'll place my stark white cardstock right in the middle of this 3D embossing folder. Now we'll place this in the machine, place in our D adapter plate, and run it right through. All right, and check that out. When this comes out of that embossing folder, you get so much texture and dimension in each one of those. And I love that it's a 3D embossing folder because there is so much dimension throughout this design. It is absolutely beautiful. All right, I've trimmed this down so it's gonna work on an A2 size card. And then we'll go in and ink this up just so we can see how that ink catches the design beautifully. You can see when we're using our foam applicators like this sort of flourish has become nice and dark, and that background gets just a much lighter color of that ink, so it really makes the design stand out absolutely beautifully. Next, we'll go in with a bit of Love Struck, which is this kind of berry red color. We'll blend it right into that purple to get a beautiful blend. And then we'll blend it up into Prom Queen, which is this gorgeous hot pink color. And all of these ink colors look absolutely stunning on this great Flourish background. And for this background, I'm gonna pull in some Astro paste that matches these colors, which is this glitter paste. I'm just going to apply a little bit onto my finger here, just so that it catches those raised surfaces. And this is just going to add a tiny bit of glitter to each one of those flourishes and really makes them kind of shine and stand out nicely. You'll wanna use a little bit more paste than you do with lunar or solar paste when you're applying it down, and use a bit of a lighter pressure and just apply it to each one of the flourishes individually. These have a bit of a milky consistency when they start out, but once they start to dry, you'll really be able to see that glitter and shine come through nicely. Next, I'll bring in a little bit of Bee Sting Red for that center Love Struck color, and I'm just going to, again, take it onto my finger and just start kind of rubbing it gently onto that red area. Another great trick if you're having trouble is to just sort of like tap the color on gently. So just go in and lightly tap with your finger all around, and it should give some great coverage as well. But once you get the hang of how to get it on, it's really quite easy to do. And then lastly, we'll use a little bit of Crown Me Purple for this bottom row of purple ink. I kind of found that that light tapping motion is what's going to get you the best coverage. And because we applied the glitter so thin, it dries really quite quickly in a matter of minutes. And the awesome part about the glitter is that once it's on there, it doesn't come off on your recipient's hand at all or move, which is really great. Because glitter is so annoying if it falls off the card, but this stays on, which is my favorite part about it. Then we're going to add this foiled sentiment that says, "May all your wishes come true," on some foam tape right in the center of that card. And that finishes it off really nicely, giving it a little bit of shine. And a simple sentiment really allows that background to shine so beautifully with all the texture and the sparkle that we added from the glitter. I love how this card turned out. It's really super encouraging with that sentiment and can be used for many different occasions. And that Flourish background is super fun because, again, it doesn't have to scream birthday, but it could be used for birthdays because it kind of looks like a little frosted or piped floral. Thank you so much for joining me while I walked through all my new birthday collection with Spellbinders. Leave me a comment down below, let me know which card or product was your favorite from the release. I would love to chat with you guys down there. And also down below is a full supplies list to everything that I used and the new supplies that are out right now. And using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Thanks for spending time with me, and I'll see you soon for another card making and crafting video.